You
that
see
was
how many
super
guys went
epic.
down?
What? Say again, Michael?
You see how many guys crashed in that futures race?
Yeah, there was quite a bit
Oh,
besides,
there's
and
so many. Yeah.
most of them are. It's an invite only. You talk about how hard it
Yeah.
is to get into press. Man, it's even harder to get your little bike on the futures deal because in order to get into Supercross, you gotta what is it, coach? Like off the top of heads, it's like what 4 points or something for.
Yeah, I think it's 4 points, and I don't know. I think it's interesting what Michael said earlier about knowing what the framework is to get the appropriate credentials. I don't know if it's anything like people trying to figure out how to go from amateur to getting a pro card. It's about as convoluted as you could possibly get. And some people say, well, no, it's pretty straightforward. You go to these races. I beg to differ. Talk to a lot of people. What races those are, when they are, what the points are, the eligibility. It's just very convoluted.
Yeah,
But we don't need to badger on that. But I do agree with you. When you look at the people who are out front, what do they have access to that most of us don't have access to? The factory test track. So it was very crystal clear who was able to spend time for whatever duration of time, a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, because those guys got out front and they were buttering everything just like the 250 Pro guys were. Um, I don't know about you, but when you go from something like an amateur national and then you're expected to jump into a supercross environment, the attrition rate is just obnoxious. So yeah, I think that was Michael. You bring up a good point. How many people did go down shows how difficult it is, and those that get a chance to ride it, they made it look like they've been out there for years. Literally, it was definitely the best race of the night.
all right. I have to backpedal on my comment about the Supercross track because as a futures rider, that would have been the scariest track to start off
Oh,
on. You got two
Oh,
big whip
absolutely.
yeah.
sections, some
Yeah,
quads. Even though the top guys were doing them, that track was scary as can be. Like instant
yeah.
arm pump as soon as the gate drops because you're trying not to die.
Death grip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Gordon, Landon Gordon,
Hmm.
he's one of those guys that you're talking about has access to those tracks, right? Like those private tracks. I will say though is that I've seen him because I go to the Paula Supercross track or Lake Elsinore Supercross track. I see those guys there a lot of time, along with other kids too. It is kind of, I guess you could say, scary, but there is a stark difference between those guys and the entry level, futures kids. And so what you're saying is about having access to all that stuff. It's also the ability to have that team that's with you too, and the settings that everybody else is able to do, all the PC guys, because they're being groomed to be PC guys. But seeing the differences and seeing how sketchier some of those riders are that aren't having that ability to have the test tracks and all that kind of stuff. I think there should be something that helps a little bit more with those guys. It's just kind of like, hey, don't do them a disservice. Like make sure that they're taken care of, and they're basically as safe as possible because you don't want to see these kids get hurt. You know,
Yeah.
um, I don't know. That's
Well, you
just
saw
my
that when the Super Minis were in one of last
uh,
year. Who was that leader, Johnny? He also does off road. Who wadded himself up on that finish line jump?
Oh
Um,
gosh,
you
what
know
was
who
that
I'm.
at? It
It
wasn't.
doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter who it is, but
Yeah,
it
was
it
it Daytona?
illustrates
I should know this, but
it it illustrates the point of how difficult it is. And I understand there's a cool novelty of bringing the super minis out or bringing out the 125 all stars or whatever, but if and I think all of our listeners get the gist of the idea. It's not just about getting access to a track. It's how
yeah,
would you even begin to set a bike up for supercross unless you have a bundle of
Canyon
resources.
Richards. Thank you.
Canyon
Somebody in the chat.
Richards, yeah.
Yeah.
So here he was ripping, and then all of a sudden, just yard darts himself on that finish line jump. But yeah, it's tough because they're trying to create entertainment. They want to have, I'd much rather watch the 125 All Stars than watch,
yeah.
the KTM e-bikes out there. No
I
disrespect
agree.
to the little guys. I mean, it's a cool novelty little thing, but at least the 125 All Stars, those are the guys we'll be seeing in the next couple of years. I just think there's, of course, I'd rather watch the KTM's versus somebody, doing a wheelbarrow race, I guess, on the
Yeah,
starting
remember
line.
the guy years ago that did the wheelie? He would like
Doug,
wheelie the
Doug,
whole track.
Doug DeMoca with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Wheelie
yeah,
King. Yeah.
yeah. That guy. Yeah,
I mean, the novelty of that type of stuff is cool, but I can't imagine being Feld trying to, you're trying to fill up a show of entertainment, but, coming back to the racing side of things, um, I just can't even begin I'm so excited about this weekend. It's not even funny because where do you even begin to start to throw a dart at Johnny? My joke that I was going to text you about was instead of talking about who do we think top three will be in the 250 class, it's like, let's pick the top three teams that
Yeah.
you think will be there.
Yeah, true, true,
Forget,
true. Well, here we'll get into that. I'm.
yeah.
Do you not think that there should be super minis at some of these rounds
No, no,
in
I
the
think it's
Supercross?
fantastic, but you know how these super mini riders are. They don't comprehend the depth or that they're
Yeah,
going
they got
full
moto
send.
set up and they're trying to huck
Well, no, they're just going
open
full
cuts.
send, right? They're,
Yeah,
as you say, young, dumb, and full of cum, and they're just full send mode. And I think it's cool as a spectator, but we go and we look at the futures and look at how many people went down on that. Those guys are good. And those are on big bikes, and hopefully they got a chance to try to, ride some supercross. Then you take a yet a smaller bike and they think they might be able to do something. And we saw Canyon Richards was doing it for a little bit, but that little bit too short. And I mean, it is part of our sport, but no, I would never say I don't want to see him out there. But think about it from a Feld standpoint. Do you think they're going to do a pre-race meeting and say, "Hey, we designed this track for the best riders in the world. We're giving you access to a fun night of challenges, but don't try to double those doubles because you're going to yard dart yourself." There's no
yeah.
super mini rider.
I couldn't agree with you more. I would the one do if refresh my memory, does Monster Cup, do they have whoops when they have the super minis and stuff like that? Did they have whoop sections? I can't remember for the
Yeah,
life of
they
me right
they
now.
run the full track that the regular guys do. So
Okay,
But
yes,
and they
there
have a full
wasn't
set of
there
whoops and everything?
in the Monster Cup though. They didn't really have whoops.
Yeah,
On the
that
full.
so I'm like, okay, I would love to have super minis. I think super minis would be rad to
yeah,
have those kids out there. It would be awesome just to see. It's like the same thing where you have select rounds or whatever. And I think you can develop the track in a way where if you're like, hey, I'm gonna have some super minis at I don't know, Atlanta or whatever it is, and you have the track design, I'm sure you could build it in a way where it's like instead of you making this right hand turn into the whoop section, you kind of cut across and it gets you right back into a section into like a 90 or something like that where you're back into the regular rhythm, something like that. The kids on the super minis nowadays is and supercross is completely different, but is that those kids are so talented and what they're able to do on those bikes, it to me it's like they can handle themselves. You've seen it on Monster Cup. You've seen, I mean, I've seen kids on super minis ride supercross tracks and stuff like
yep,
that, but
yep.
they can do it. I just think that you need to develop the track in a way that is safer for them to be able to do it. But I would love to see a gate full of two strokes, especially super minis, just ripping a supercross track. I think would be awesome.
I agree with you 100%. And like what Boop Nose said here, between the sound and the smell, I think having
Oh
those
yeah.
two strokes out there is phenomenal. Here's something that I would recommend, Michael, along your thread of thought. First and foremost, I love having the 85s out there. I love having the 125 All Stars. Think about how difficult it would be for Feld to have that part of the track where they could carve off, drop back onto the track. How about go just a different direction, but directly in line with your thread of thought? Have all the big jumps on the track be tabletops. So the big guys, they can literally go from takeoff to landing. We still get the air. We get all the things that we love, the excitement of those guys. But if you built it as a tabletop, so the guys, the super minis jump on, jump off, or if they can go the full distance and they go full send mode, I think it's now it's easy for us to say because that's a lot of dirt, it's a lot of manpower. But if we were to try to find a happy medium, make a track that has I refer to tabletops as a safe escape route. If you hit false neutral off the face of it, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a much safer landing than a point to point. So I agree with you. I think setting the track up so it's safer for them, but we don't distract or we don't take away from the big bikes and why we're all there, the big
Yeah.
450s, the 250s. Full send mode is still there for them. That high level of difficulty still there, but then there's those parachute jumps like tabletops where,
Yeah.
hey, if you don't, you think you can make it and you don't, okay, where you're going
Yeah.
to land at the very end and bounce off and just don't have a set of whoops immediately afterwards. So then they're
Yeah.
just nose picking it into it. But
Yeah, you could set it up in a way and my taking my like my racer hat
yeah,
off and like putting my fan hat back on is I would hate to see tables as big jumps. I don't know what it is. I've jumped 200-foot, 180-foot jumps that are tables or like step over type things. And it's like, yeah, that was no big deal. But
yeah,
if I looked at that and it was two peaks, I'm like, no way in hell am I ever jumping that. And so it does look a little different. And what I've been told by a few people, and is what you said about the amount of dirt it takes to build a table instead of double. and I think these guys are already limited as it is with
Sure,
tabletops.
sure.
But that is an avenue to be able to create it, right? Like it's at least your it to me is you're not having the conversation. You're like, well, it's not possible. We've
Hmm.
talked about this for 5 minutes now, and we've given three different solutions of how you could do it. You know, and I'm an idiot, and so I don't really know that much about what this is going on. But I'm able to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure these guys like, oh my gosh, why am I drawing a blank on who builds these trucks? I
Dirt works.
Dirtworks, yeah. So all the guys at Dirtworks, they know what they're doing. Like they could figure it out. They could do something. But I think it would be awesome. I would love to see
It's
it.
all time. So my thought is this sport is turning into an elitist sport, just like what you guys are talking about. Experience is best when it's not your own. As an amateur that doesn't have access to any supercross stuff, you are considerably at a disadvantage to people that have access to that stuff that can go, hey, Johnny, you need to run. You need to send your suspension off here. It needs to be super stiff. This is the setup for the whoops. This is what you need to do so that you've got the best available equipment to go ride that stuff. If you're learning on the fly, it doesn't matter if you're super talented, you're not going to be up to par with the other guys. And with the futures, well, you just have factory teams that are literally taking settings from their factory guys, giving them to the little kids plus the track. So how are you supposed to compete with that? And really the futures is almost at the point where same thing with the combine, it is an invite only
Yeah.
thing. So it's already factory kids. We saw it last weekend at A2. These kids were quadding, and as a young kid, that
Blows your
it
mind, doesn't it?
yeah, it means that they've been on the track for they've got
Wow.
good equipment
Yeah.
and they've got experience behind them. So it's hard to get into that. There's no way for you to try to compete on the same level to even get your supercross license. But
Yeah.
I do think it's important for the little 50s and the 65s and the 85s to have that opportunity. However, some of the stuff that Arena Cross is doing is they race on Friday night and then they leave the weekends open where they dumb the track down for everyone to race and get better. And you know that everyone and their mom would want to go ride the supercross track as long as they made it a little bit safer with the tabletops on the finish lines, kind of make the whoops way cut down. But then you're getting into the logistics of how do we rent out the stadium another week or another day because it's going to be very expensive. So it's
Well,
that whole thing is a weird
don't
dynamic.
don't forget Johnny Feld was doing that. Remember there were some rounds. This would have been 3, 4 years ago.
And I'm
Remember where
sure it was
they
a
did?
test, but you know it
Yeah.
was expensive.
Well,
Was it on
that
Sundays?
yeah, they would
Yeah.
do it on
Yeah.
And real
Sundays.
quick, guys, we only have 29 likes and we got 300 people watching. If you like this stuff, make sure that you're WFO on that like button. Sorry, coach. Go for
Yes,
it.
please. No, absolutely, please. You put a lot of time and effort into these, and the logarithms
We do.
really do eat it up.
Group effort. Group effort.
No, it is. But for Michael and I, we just get to link and we get to dial in. You set it all up, and I mean that sincerely. The big thing is those guys being felled. They did try to give those amateurs a chance to be able to do it, but then it becomes kind of a double-edged sword because as a parent with a young rider to take the time to travel to these races to only race for 4 or 5 minutes, it's like it's a good idea. They kind of got halfway there, but then for the sake of time and money and everything else, it's very short and it's abbreviated. There's so much that goes into the frustrations of the parents. Now, again, I am not here to bash promoters. We're all thankful that they put on races, but I do, obviously the lion's share of our business is amateur riders from super minis all the way up to vet riders. But the frustration with the parents are, hey, I drive a day to go to a race. I look at my hour meter between practice and all my motos, and I run 72 classes. I put a total of 40 minutes on my bike over a 3-day weekend of racing. People are getting disenchanted with that, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed. I'm not saying that. Like I was talking to Todd Waters this morning. Todd Waters, for those of you who know the Australian market, he was teammates with Caroli. He rode for all of those big teams over there. Well, I was speaking. Todd now owns the Husqvarna Raceline team in Australia, and he and two of his riders, they went out and they did 3 40-minute motos in deep sand. And I just think it's amazing because if you were to tell some of the riders over here on stateside that we're going to do 3 40-minute motos outdoors, they would go home and cry. And it's interesting because when you come around full circle, what people are getting frustrated with is they go to the races and they don't get a chance to race. There's literally 2 and 3 lap motos that are a minute and a half to 2 minutes. And so if you drive, say from Florida to Texas or Texas to Florida, and you do all these different classes and you literally look at your hour meter and you're putting a total of 32 to 33 minutes on a bike over 5 days of racing, the parents are like, the prices are going up, the amount of time on the track is going down. The parents are like, no. So that's talking with some of the moto guys. They've been going to more of the hair scrambles and they've been doing something, at least they're 90 minutes on their motorcycle. They're not
Yeah,
there
all the
for
off
three
road stuff
days.
is.
Say it again, Johnny.
Oh, I was background singing for you. I was like, yeah, all the off road
Yeah.
racings are up, and really this should be more because more bikes were sold during the pandemic. Everybody wants to go out there and go ride,
Yeah.
so it's something that's like a small transition to things, and I think that's what the sport is looking at. We've got the mix between motocross and supercross coming, and